Okay, so before we begin with today's session, I'd like to pause and thank the AI Week Committee for their work in ensuring this week's program success. They include Ingrid Steiner from the Center for Excellence in Teaching, Michaela Ullman from USC Libraries, and the entire OAI, the Office of Academic Integrity team, Nancy Dominguez, Cecilia Herrera, Ashley Claiborne, Taylor Dome, and Nancy Salto. All of their dedication to the week-long program has been really instrumental in making this event a success. I'd also like to mention that this session is being recorded and will be uploaded on our website at a later date. Feel free to add any questions you have to the chat, and we'll make sure to address them during the Q&A portion. And also at the end of this session, you'll be prompted to complete a short, and let me emphasize, short survey. Please take the time to complete that. Know that your feedback will be greatly appreciated and received so that we can increase and improve the program's effectiveness moving forward. Lastly, and probably most importantly, I'd like to thank our presenter, Dr. Dora Kingsley-Vertenten, a professor in the Souls Price School of Public Policy. Dr. Vertenten, we are so grateful to you for taking the time out to share your knowledge with us today. Today's session, as I will summarize it will focus on generative AI and more specifically how it can be included in pedagogy and still reinforce the tenets of academic integrity. I've been told that is close enough to the scope of the program, so hopefully I captured at least an essence of what we're going to be talking about today. But without further ado, I'd like to turn the mic over to Dr. Kingsley-Vertenten. Thank you again for your time today.
Thank you for having me, and thanks to the committee to put together this activity and for the staff that has supported it. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today, particularly as this is a new thought process I've been having, and so it's just really exciting to have an opportunity to work out my thoughts, and so I'm looking forward to any feedback that you might have today. And let me get my deck up. Let's see. Okay. A little bit about me. I have been teaching at USC since 1996. My doctorate's in public administration. My dissertation was in the use of information technology for political analysis. So this has long been an interest of mine ever since I graduated from UC Davis with a degree in rhetoric. And my faculty member told me I may not have learned anything, but if I haven't learned to talk about it, I needed to take more classes. So I have been teaching both in our Sacramento and a little bit in our international program, primarily since I've been full-time since 2010 as leading our Master's in Public Administration online, which has demanded both an attention to the technologies and to training the students to go back in the marketplace, since our students are typically mid-career and not just out of college. They really are quite interested in making sure that their skill sets are up to speed. And so staying ahead of the digital tools that are accessible to make teamwork and classwork and research available to a wide variety of students in multiple places in their life and across the country, and some of them expats overseas or in military, has been quite the joy of the faculty at the Price School. My focus is on participatory democracy and on digital literacy. So this is a subject matter I study closely and follow and include in our teaching practices, but I am by no means expert. So I'd like to thank today, first and foremost, Brandon DeBrule, who is with Pardee Rand Graduate School, who is an expert in AI and was able to bounce my ideas off of him and work out some thoughts I have had. We've partnered on other issues. I also want to thank Matthew Brill, who is the lead instructional designer for the Price School, who also has been through this presentation with me and was very helpful in some of the content that needed some augmentation and development. Brandon is quoted as saying that artificial intelligence is an efficiency and not a knowledge acquisition tool. And so for your perspective, that's where I come from, is what can the tool do for me as a researcher, a writer, and a faculty member? What can it do for our students? more importantly, how do I prepare them for the real world and the job market outside of school? And how do I make the point to them that the knowledge that comes out, just like Amy, if you heard the presentation that was before me, made the point, an excellent point about hallucinations and the need to verify. The nexus here is what's important, and I think I'm going to talk about today. Who doesn't love a good Venn diagram? So artificial intelligence and academic integrity, I've heard it referred to as AI squared. That doesn't seem to have caught on, but it's a nice concept. Really forces us, both as students and faculty, and in supporting roles. I don't have an expertise as a librarian, but I certainly respect those who do and can be so helpful here in the assessment principles that are important to how we work on classroom education. I just wanted to take a minute to talk about the terminology so we're all on the same page. We talk a little bit about the differences. I won't beg to read this to you, but I do want to make the distinctions on a couple of these. The DALL-E and the whimsical technology OpenAI has developed. Microsoft and Google are in this space as well. Make it lots of fun to create text to image models. They're useful for creating all kinds of mind maps and operational tools that I ask my students to do. Unfortunately, they may or may not all come out looking the same. You'll see a number of examples here just to spice up my presentation. The GPT as a pre-trained transformer is moving faster than I think we like to update our content and material. I think it's important to talk about both the artificial intelligence language model and the future of where those algorithms and deep learning techniques are going. Just a quick timeline of how fast that AI has developed. I assume most of us are familiar with Grammarly. It's been a wonderful tool for our students and for faculty since it attaches to our emails and everything else we use. But that was first developed and published in 2009, and that was almost 15 years ago. The DALL-E graphic depictions were released in 2021. They are imminently marketing and expecting to come out soon the text to video capabilities from OpenAI. ChatGPT and its various updates were first in the market in November of 2022. I think I got my first paper turned in using ChatGPT by a student in December of that year. You can read the rest of the dates yourself. The point I would like to make is if you're using, I know Amy talked about the free versions of 3 and 3.5. I think the subscription to 4 is only a $20 a month subscription. That's not out of the reach of our graduate students, certainly. That only has a knowledge base through 2021. And if you looked carefully, particularly she gave some great examples this morning of all kinds of hallucinated and unhallucinated citations, they were all predated that and predated that significantly. ChatGPT 5, which we can expect to be released, I'm assuming this year, and has been previewed in some of the press articles, has acknowledged that their cutoff for information is 2023. I don't know that they've told us exactly when in 2023. So obviously the easiest question is to ask your students some question of something that's happened since the technology has cut off its repository of information. All of that to say that the technology is developing faster and it is more efficient. A number of the hallucinations that were embedded in the earlier versions of ChatGPT 4, 3, 5, and on to 4 have been dealt with. And so the newer versions are obviously cleaner, but continue to be less reliable, like anything, bad data in, bad data out. In terms of future dynamic artificial intelligence, which is how they anticipate ChatGPT 5 will be when it hits the market, that anticipates a real-time or near real-time based evolution of adaptive learning with new data and interactions in real time. It will optimize, it will process current information, it hopes to be scalable. Again, I've sourced this to Whimsical and the ChatGPT content, but also found, easily in some of the press and industry conversations about what's coming out in the new AI, ChatGPT 5 in particular. As it will correct itself, going forward, I'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like. There's one of my data-driven images generated from ChatGPT. But I think the important thing here is to think of ourselves in a post-plagiarism world. We've gone past the plagiarism concerns that I grew up in. That doesn't mean that I don't have an absolute adherence to the academic integrity model and believe that we should be adhering to that and the students as well. But it does mean that the concept of plagiarism itself as a teaching focus is less and less useful. I would define a post-plagiarism world in terms of historical content. Unfortunately, all of this happening during my lifetime, when we started with library card catalogs, and I had to, in my doctoral program, I had to go to the library, look them up, and go find the article and come back. That moved to a system, if you're interested in sort of the system of it, this link with the UC Melville system is quite interesting, where the computers were centralized. That moved into their ability to move the computers offsite into a content management system. Headless CMSs, a cloud-based content management, which allowed us to get to the Google Scholar or the JSTOR models, and ultimately the use of AI and machine learning with ChatGPT and the dynamic AI, which is coming. All of that I define as the quick movement that's happened in the last probably 2 decades, maybe 3, to get us to the sort of post-plagiarism world where we need to be thinking about more ideas than just how they cut and paste the content.
Lightning alert.
There are 6 tenets of post-plagiarism. This has come from a faculty member who's at Calgary. Most of the current writing on this subject cannot be found in academic journals. It is publishable in either the Medium or in microblogs, which is where Dr. Eaton publishes. I won't read it to you. I think she has some important considerations for the type of materials that the students have access to. And can make sense for the assignments and even the way we're doing our own work. Again, the student and faculty and authors have to maintain responsibility for what they're doing. While they may relinquish control to the tool that they're using to do their searches for them or to mine for keywords or other kind of data, that doesn't allow them to obfuscate their responsibility. Attribution remains key and important, and that we're actually transcending, if you will, that definition of plagiarism. Now, one of the things I'd like to propose here is that we're teaching academic integrity in too limited a fashion. That traditionally we have always taught, or at least I have taught, academic integrity as a process. So this flowchart, and I can blow it up a little bit, but talks about the way we talk to our students about defining academic integrity and sharing those policies, explaining the importance of the policies, what happens when they violate academic codes or they have academic dishonesty, strategies that we would put into place to help for compliance and assessment, everything from conducting workshops and seminars to do better education, both with faculty and with our students, establishing honor codes and having conversations in class where they actually buy into the idea and set their own rules and guidebooks, to the use of plagiarism detection tools. Often, currently the Turnitin version, at least the one that belongs in Blackboard. I'm not sure the Turnitin version that will belong in Brightspace, but we'll see. Reporting misconduct and then adjudicating the punishment to that has been our traditional way, if you will, of my understanding, the way that we've taught the process. The tools of teaching that academic integrity issue start with a detection issue. Up there, you can see the Turnitin, Grammarly, and Copyscape. Again, I have citations here to the generation of these tools using the artificial intelligence. We don't often get to, we don't use proctoring services. We found them not very helpful in in our online program, but there are lots of other ways of doing this, or automated grading systems you may or may not use in your own field, in your own school. James Zhao, a machine learning scholar at Stanford and one of the leading experts on the use of AI and its implications, talks about the fact that our detecting systems are unreliable and easily gamed. And you know that if you've tried the Turnitin this last semester or the one before, where it said, oh, this student has a 66 or 76% AI copied paper, and you've gone to talk to the students and they're horrified because they don't even know how to use their computer. So they may have done other things wrong, but it wasn't cheating with an AI tool. I understand that some of those detection tools have been pulled back because they're so unreliable, and we'll see how that works in our the new linkage and the new platform we're using come May. Really, what we're missing here is teaching the idea of intellectual property to our students. From a student perspective, there is research that shows that a student who has grown up understanding the process of finding the material, reading the material, synthesizing the material, copying the material, or using that appropriately and citing whether or not they do any of those things correctly, that process gets repeated in their actual use of the technologies. And there's multiple technologies besides ChatGPT, which are very useful to academics and students. But to them, may not to us, but to them, it seems like it's the same process. And so it's much harder for them to distinguish that searching with keywords, finding content, looking at the citations, having a citation is different than what we've all done in teaching them how to do academic integrity. And we've lost a focus on teaching them the idea that intellectual property is what we're talking about. Now, for all the content creators that are out there on TikTok, still that doesn't always compute in an academic setting, that in fact we should be teaching a focus on what is intellectual property. Why does that matter? When a student team creates a project, or they iterate an assignment and use it for the next set of materials, when they get an idea from an artificial intelligence and move that forward. This is a flow chart in terms of the ideas about intellectual property. We're not talking to them about the fact that there's a legal system which governs this, that they as a creator, or someone somewhere else as a creator, has created the content that then creates this, put into that AI technology, whether they do it themselves or someone else has put their content in, that is subject to intellectual property law, which is why we pound on them, among other reasons, for their academic integrity and honesty, that they have rights and obligations, and there's an enforcement of those rights, even beyond writing the student paper. And so there are compliance requirements and interpretation of that. But again, all centralized around what is intellectual property. Is that the output of what comes through AI? Is that what the student wrote as their submittal to the paper? Is that what the team worked on? Is that what the faculty member thought of in terms of writing the prompt or creating the assignment? And so I'm suggesting, among other things, that we spend some time rethinking how we approach academic integrity teaching and sharing ethical principles for our students to understand how they are using AI, and more importantly, how we're going to detect that generation of content by somebody else. So clearly, and I have citations here in a minute, but the policy check and the departmental check, looking at the university level, looking at your particular school level, there should be language in your course syllabus that makes it explicit so that the students understand what that looks like. And then I always think it's a good practice to talk to students. Again, this framework is one from Dr. Eaton at Calgary, but it's not much different than sort of the traditional ways we teach academic integrity, but the focus should be different. I'm not moving let's forward. Let's go here. For example, in the online program syllabus for all of our courses at Price for our MPA, we clearly have a statement that says submitting assignment prompts or other course material is a violation of the intellectual property ownership rights of the faculty and the school, which is clearly already disallowed under the USC policy prohibiting distribution of course materials. So we want to make it very clear to the student at the outset that taking that prompt and putting it in straight as it is, putting it in a search engine, whether that's a ChatGPT or a Research Rabbit or a Litco, trying to look for a map of connected sources, is a clear and compelling academic violation just on the issue of inputs and intellectual property. Oops, go back one more. I wanted to include here the information. Why am I jumping? Sorry about that. Include here the introduction on citations. So we use APA 7 at Price in our MPA program. All of these are new, even the Chicago style guide has just updated and included generating text citations. USC has a very useful generative AI policy, useful to share with the students, but there are now, which there weren't 6 months ago, clear and compelling direction on how to cite the use of GPT so that your students and my students can use those. Want to talk a little bit about the reporting tool I'd like to demo here. In our online program, we're using both augmented assignments, which focus on teaching them the correct use of the artificial intelligence and teaching them research skills using the new tools, assuming the tools are for knowledge acquisition efficiency, not for knowledge acquisition content. The ways that we seek students to do verification and the ways we encourage faculty to evaluate. And again, without being horribly time consuming on the faculty's time to look through content, and I won't talk to how to do that, but a number of these things and knowing what the tools are make it much easier for faculty to both encourage student evaluations and do their own. We use snowballing exercises as a separate assignment, asking the students to do data visualization assignments using either Litmap or Research Rabbit. You can put in one article. It will map for you the entire network of who has cited that article and where that article was cited since the article was published. I don't know where all that stuff was when I did my dissertation in the early 90s, but it would have made my life so much easier and saved me oodles of time. Similarly, Research Rabbit, although they're not considered generative AI, they are AI features, and they make many of the assignments that we used to ask students to do by longhand, easy and replicatable in about 5 minutes flat once they know how to use the tool. We also ask them to submit proof of content, but we do that in a fashion that helps them. In our program, we're using Zotero as a reference manager. I know that Keck, we teach a number of quantitative courses for the Keck Online MPH. Asking students to upload all of their research. In introductory onboarding classes, we ask them to upload that to a group file, which is across all of the students in the course to leverage their research. By the time they get to more senior classes or capstone, they have their own folders, but using a reference management system like Zotero, where the students have to upload, it will take the citation, it will take the abstract, but it will take the entire content of the material, whether you download that from JSTOR or Google. It's easy for a faculty member. Either I ask my students to do the printout of their citations on a weekly basis and then to process that with analytic assignments, but it's easier for a faculty member to spot check any of their reference management tools separate from their assignment to see that they're capturing actual researchable elements without hallucinations. When it comes to any of our more complicated assignments, we use a Google form, and we are happy to share that with you. It was an idea that I either stole or appropriated or massaged from a number of these random email conversations. and chat lines. But the OEDM Office of Online Education has created for me. I have a short form and a long form, but among those, it's talking about how the students should appropriately use AI, but in fact, it's teaching them how to do research successfully, because it's moving the conversation from the same steps we would talk to them about in terms of academic integrity, but then adding a research element to it. So I have 3 samples here. Did you verify the accuracy of the information on the AI tool produced? Asking them, what was the instance? What did the tool tell you that you used? What did you do to verify that? Where are the links? How did you do that content? Because I'll never forget teaching many years ago, and I sent a student to look something up in Google, which to me I thought was an obvious answer. And they were nice enough to look at me with pity and say, well, that's fine, Dr. Dora, but I don't understand when I get a Google reference, what's good and what's not good. And I thought it's been such an insightful comment to me, that the students don't know how to discern information because they don't have our expertise, and it's the first time that they're looking. So I find this kind of a conversation useful. They find it time consuming, but I think on a learning exercise, this has been very useful. Second example from our form is, during that accuracy check, did you discover false information? And how did you know it was false? What was false about it? And asking them again to document that. You don't have to do this very many times for them, have to put in every prompt and what did they ask? What did they get out? Where did they look for it? How did they fix it? Before they're trained to do that, and begging not to have to put it all in a Google form. And finally, we make this point that the use of generative AI to write, edit, brainstorm, and summarize, and actually some of them are very good about having mastered certain tools that are artificial intelligence, maybe not generative AI, but are tools to either edit their materials or to plan and outline their content. They actually have some very good uses of tools. But asking them to run down this list and then certifying that these are the examples in terms of teaching them more specifics about what it is we need to do to protect the intellectual contributions and unique intellectual property rights. And finally, we force them to acknowledge that they have reviewed the policy, that they're using it both ethically and appropriately, and that if they have any issue, not to plug your office jocks, but here, but clearly that where would they go if they don't know what to do? And just a comment on, as you're thinking about the complexity of what's out there and how fast the students are learning it, and how fast we need to respond, I would only suggest that the future is moving, even more quickly forward. The takeaways here are the fact that the fast development also means there's a lot less reliable content, as people have put in, quote unquote, bad data into that generative AI. My suggestion that we need to transform at least our focus on teaching process to teaching intellectual property, that the new AI tools are changing the way we both behave and the time it takes to research, write, cite, and even now doing graphic designing. The good news is that leaves more time for, actually wrestling with the content and doing the intellectual contributions as the efficiencies pile up. But that means there's going to be a commensurate burden on the practice of verification, both at the student level, right, demanding them to verify, like the form that I use, that they never had to do before, and in fact, the way that the faculty does our assessments. Teaching, for me, the goal of teaching in an era of ever advancing AI is to equip students to be able to verify what they do and what they use, which I think is a critical skill, which was the point of where we started on the academic integrity round. And rapidly equipping faculty to evaluate appropriately the use of those tools, which the students are out there doing. And in the future, as the AI changes a concept to both what the inputs are and not just the outputs, right? When we no longer are just discussing what do we get out of, the AI, but what do we put in that? Is it appropriate? I was sitting in an academic conference on policy, I think in Chicago, and the convener of the conference, who had 4 very important scholars in front of him who had written papers they were presenting, said, well, I put your papers into the AI, and this is what I got back in terms of key points. And I, for one, was absolutely horrified that anybody would think they had the right to take somebody else's work and upload that in AI where it's going to live forever. There's no taking that back. And that was not his intellectual contribution to the world to be, to be put into these systems. So I think a pedagogical emphasis is important, but also a change from just the outputs to actually thinking about the inputs. And so I'll leave you with my comment here. My little QR code goes to my LinkedIn page if you're interested in finding me. USC demanded I keep my maiden name on my email address, so that's why I'm kingsley@usc.edu if you'd like to find me. Happy to take questions. I know I moved through that all rather quickly, so.
Dr. Bertenton, Kingsley Bertenton, thank you again. I want to say these slides and your talk is having a profound impact, I will say, on me as I'm thinking about what a post-plagiarism world looks like. And so, as you said, the Zoom world, it's an interesting one in which I never know how long to wait or to be able to pause and give people time to ask questions. But at this time, if anyone in the audience does have questions and would like to come off of mute or enter the question into the chat, we'd be happy to honor that. I think as we're waiting, one of the things that really kind of spoke to me, a good portion of your talk was about intellectual property. And I'll pause that and let Brandon, who's raised his hand, ask his question.
Hello.
Good to see you, Brandon.
Hello. I appreciate you citing me, by the way. Thank you. I'm the Brandon DeBrol that you cited, so I appreciate that. Just out of curiosity about thinking through the intellectual property thing. So maybe we're actually thinking the same thing about sort of how do you take people from, like, so I teach at the graduate school here at Rand, and I'm also a graduate student at USC, so I run into graduate teaching students a lot. And one of the things that I often run into is, like, how do you best teach them about the notions of intellectual property without going into that steeped legal jargon in such a way that they're going to get lost or even be more confused than if you gave them a process? So, like, I agree that the process doesn't seem to work well in this context, but what's the alternative? What are your thoughts on the alternative?
One, I think it's worth spending some time on the legal jargon, right? I mean, there's a framework for what makes this unique, and a lot of lawyers who make up their annual salary, right, litigating on these issues. It's hard to understand for students who are, in my opinion, trying to soak in knowledge and aren't confident in their own thoughts, to actually think about the fact that they have an answer, they have a perspective, they have a voice, and that the voice is theirs. So, I see a little bit of it in the social equity and social justice conversations that we have. I do a number of exercises to get students to practice with their own voices, their own take on analysis. And I think more of focusing on that material, once they see something that they've thought of originally and can hold on to that as their original property, then it makes more sense to them that they don't want somebody else claiming credit for that. That may be because I teach graduate school, and so I always tell them, okay, undergraduate, you learned all there is to learn. Now, now we're here to do the application. How do you find the theory and link it to the practice and come up with your own ideas? So that may just be from where I sit.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think one of the struggles that I've often seen is people will just view these tools as a way to facilitate speed and not thought. And so like, I need to get X assignment done as fast as possible, and I really don't care about anything else. And so, you know, it's that sort of overriding efficiency claim that you mentioned. But yeah.
I grade like my mother parented, so I flunk early and hard, and until they actually get it and will put the work into it. I agree. There is a fair amount of shirking that goes on till they kind of have tested the waters to see what they can get away with.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Brandon. I think that you were more succinctly asking the question I was intending to. Sarah, see your hand is raised.
Yeah, so I really liked like the form that you have for students to fill out. And I wanted to know more about that. So you said it was just for complex projects.
I have two. I have a long form and a short form. So I use the long form early in the semester, both with my starter students who are in their first semester and with my capstone students who are in their last semester. Primarily because the capstone students have not been introduced to it if they've been in the program for 2 years. Hopefully now that I'm doing it with the onboarding students, that will carry through the program. The long form is very tedious in terms of asking them the steps that they go through, the way you would go about doing any kind of an assignment. The short form shortens that up to focus on the AI and the verification processes in particular, which I'm happy to share both. What I have found in using that document last semester and this is it's an additional burden when it's attached to a particular assignment. I give bonus points or extra credit or whatever we're allowed to do when the students attach the form to the assignment. But to get them to focus on it, I need to make up assignments which are specifically just focusing on using the material in my survey, so that they've actually gone through the process once, focusing on the steps, if you will, rather than trying to do that and produce product.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I would love to see the forms that you have. I guess my second question is regarding this. Did you or like the the department do like any type of data analysis on like how much students were using AI tools before deciding to implement like augmented assignments and these discussions, or did you do it just in response to just AI developments?
I did it because I'm freaky about digital literacy and digital tools. So, and I think that the students need to learn appropriate, practices while they're still in graduate school and can make mistakes. So, it wasn't very long after, this stuff was only invented in the fall of 22, which is not even a year and a half ago. In an online program, because of the discussion boards, I think that I know more of my students' voices because I read them every week in research blogs and discussion boards, as well as their assignments, because the emphasis is on more writing, if you will, than a traditional classroom that I've taught in. So it's easy for me to know when they were using ChatGPT. One, it's never on point, right? My assignments are generally complex. They generally have requirements to be state-of-the-art research. And so, they've missed the prompt entirely, or it's not in the student's voice. Now, not every campus course spends enough time with students, and I didn't when I was in front of a classroom. I don't know how everybody's written voice like I do in the online. So it was obvious to me when I had students who weren't, in the traditional issue, they were short on time or they weren't doing well in class, and they wanted to produce, a full assignment to get their homework in before the class closed. But based on that, I thought, and Brandon and I have worked on this issue and done papers at conferences together. But it would behoove us to get on top of this in terms of teaching our students, particularly because they're in the public domain. And I believe there's hopefully a higher consequence for making mistakes when you're in government, but also in all of the ancillary agencies, I worry about the liability for their doing it wrong. So I don't know if that answers your question, Sarah, but this form was a discussion point in a number of the email forums that I subscribe to, both at USC and nationally. The survey itself was created with myself, but in large part by Matthew Burrell and his team.
Yeah, thank you for that insight.
What other questions can I answer? Or any other feedback? I'm interested as I work out this speech, because it won't be the first time I probably give it. I'm looking forward to beta testing it here.
We appreciate you allowing us to be your guinea pig and take it on the road show. Are there any other questions from our audience? Okay, well, with that, I think I'd just like to close by saying thank you once again, Dr. Kingsley-Vertenton, for just a wonderful and timely topic and presentation. You've certainly given us, I'll say me, a lot to reflect on, specifically with regard to the appropriate use of AI, making sure that we're doing our part to educate students on the concepts of intellectual property. And I think, in your closing remark, you were saying, considering the impact that it might have beyond USC, like this is a place where students can make mistakes, but in their career, the consequences can be far more severe. So we want to make sure that we're intervening appropriately. So thank you so much for this wonderful talk. We will be taking the recording. Absolutely. We'll be taking this recording and publishing it on our website shortly. And if it's possible, you don't have to commit to it now, but just as the request came out, for any of if you have any handouts or documents that you would like to share, that we can make available, that would be wonderful as well.
Yeah, I didn't do a handout, which I thought was a wonderful idea that Amy did. But I would happy to send you both forms. And then, if you wanted to distribute it to anybody who asks. And Sarah, you want to put your email in the chat bar, and I'll make sure you get a copy directly. Thank you.
Yeah, I can do that. Thank you.